All right, before we go, I'm just going to do a quick audio check. Can everybody hear us? If you're in the chat room, please just give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down or some sort of emotion that lets us know that there is audio going through and that everybody can hear. Um, and for while we're doing this, I am, of course, your host for the evening, Tabletop Misfits. I run a interview show on Wednesday nights here on the channel where we interview people for tabletop different reasons. But I've also got here two very impressive people in my line of work. The first one, of course, is Seth over here at Operation Tabletop. Seth, if you can just give us a shout out, make sure everybody can hear you.
Yeah, mic check. Last time, my mic came in really quiet, so if I'm coming through really quiet, James is coming through really loud, during the chat, please just let us know so we can make some adjustments now before we really start diving into it.
Okay. And then, of course, we also have Dr. Kilmer, who is our special guest for the evening, who is also going to be helping us kind of go through some questions of things that we talked about on Wednesday, as well as other options to how to blend mental health and tabletop, which is, I think, really cool because it's a real main reason why I got back into it, truthfully. Not gonna lie. But if you can just give us a shout out, Dr. Kilmer, let us know who you are, where they can find you, that kind of fun stuff.
Hey, yeah, I'm Dr. Jared Kilmer. I also have anxiety that my mic could be too quiet, so if it is, please let me know. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist up in Seattle, Washington. I serve as the clinic director at SavePoint Behavioral Health, and you can find me at savepointbh.com. A lot of my career has been dedicated to the research application
Oh, God.
of
That's not you.
games.
I think we're good.
Yeah,
I was getting some
cool.
echo. There was some really nasty echo there for a moment, but I think that was me trying to test test our audio with
Mhm.
with my phone because my phone was like screech screech. So I hope that did not kill everybody else's ears at the same time. But yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, real quick, we're gonna go back around now that I think audios are set, and I've raised the audio for our friends because both the guest as well as Seth were very quiet on my phone compared to me, who's always loud. And real quick, we're just gonna go around the table once more, let everybody kind of let Seth give a little elevator's pitch of who he is and what he's doing this month, and then we'll go right back to Dr. Comer and he can redo his pitch that sounded so wonderful, but I interrupted him because I wanted to make sure that people were actually hearing it. So, real quick, Seth, let us know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Seth Ewing. I'm the president and founder of Operation Tabletop, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that prevents veteran suicide by fostering connections through tabletop games. This month, we're doing a PTSD awareness game-a-thon event where we're putting on tabletop games every Saturday in, in the month of June. We'll be doing tonight. We're doing Dungeons and Dragons. Next week is Call of Cthulhu. We've got Candela Obscura being ran by Northwolf 911, which is a Twitch streamer, great guy, a professional DM. And we'll have Catan, and we'll be doing some mini painting as well, digital, like just live streaming, and people just get together and do some mini painting. So if you would like to register to sign up for any of those events, just go to operationtabletop.org.
Awesome. And then, of course, our special guest for the evening and our certified doctor, because none of us are certified, Dr. Kilmer.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Um, I'm Dr. Jared Kilmer. Y'all can call me Jared for this. Like, no need to call me doctor. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've spent my career focused on researching games and how to apply them therapeutically. Currently, I am the clinic director at a Seattle-based psych clinic called SavePoint Behavioral Health. Most of my caseload and our practice broadly is focused on providing neurodivergent, geek, and gamer affirming counseling and assessment services to our clients. And I think one of the reasons I'm primarily here is utilizing therapeutically applied role-playing games in the VA system. And before I moved on and working through Game to Grow, me and my partner and some of our colleagues wrote a book, Therapeutically Applied Role-Playing Games, the Game to Grow Method. Thank you, Seth. Which is a great guide if you are a clinician or just curious on how to apply role-playing games in a therapeutic setting.
And I am just a person who really, really likes to talk, and they offered me the opportunity to be the host for tonight. So that's why I'm sitting here. But no, like I said, I've been doing interview shows with specifically for Tabletop Misfits. We're about 3 years coming up now here soon, and guests is a normal for us here at the tavern. And tonight, this was an opportunity as a prior veteran myself, or prior active duty member, current veteran, and trying to get this kind of blend. Because for me personally, it's kind of this is what started back into tabletop for myself after some very dark moments of my own life. So, of course, the first thing we're going to do, we've got through the introductions, because the introductions are always important. But now we're going to kind of start going back through some questions. Now, while during this show, this entire interview is completely interactive. So guests or chat, please throw any questions you have up. If you can't get questions on here, but you're listening and you're having issues getting a hold of us, send questions on social media, send questions on Discord, and somebody will find this question. Just make sure you tag us in some way, shape, or form so we can actually snag it, because I don't want to miss a question, because in my opinion, these are more important than anything else, is to get questions that other people have answered needs. So I don't know, do we want to dive straight into mental health, Seth, or do we want to kind of get an idea of Dr. Kilmer's or Jared's background in tabletop rather than in just mental health? Would you rather?
Man, let's talk tabletop.
All right, let's talk tabletop. I can talk tabletop all day long. That's my jam. So I always ask my guests 3 questions. 1, when did you get into tabletop?
You're doing them sequentially. You're not giving me all 3 at once.
No, I'm not gonna give you all 3 at once, because if you're like me, then you'll forget the other 2 by the time you get back to the first one. So.
Oh yeah, I got a pin out just in case.
Nope, I'm not gonna slam you with questions.
But no, my answer is pretty easy. I always thought that tabletop role-playing games would be like maybe too enticing when I was a kid.
Okay.
So and they had a bad rap. Like they didn't look cool in media, so I also kind of avoided them trying to just fit in until about 2014, 2015. I was a fan of like Penny Arcade growing up. We were doing Positions Incorporated in podcast form. It got me an opportunity to like listen and feel like I was at a table and understand how it worked. And that coalesced at a really perfect time in my life when 5th edition was about to come out.
Okay.
And I figured, this is the perfect time, 2015. I could start from scratch and like fit in.
Yeah.
And I was already interested in games and how they work. And so getting to read the player's handbook start to finish was like opening up the hood on a car and just like playing with every single piece.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Yeah.
I've been playing D&D for almost 20 years. I don't think I've ever actually read one of the books from start to finish. Ever.
I don't think I could recommend it. But there was a period of my life where I knew like, that question you have is probably like page 84.
That's nuts. Very impressive, but that's nuts. I couldn't do it. But my brain works very differently, which is fine. Okay.
I just Google the questions.
Yeah, exactly. I Google PDF find. I always figuring out ways to do it faster. Awesome. So 2014. So really, this is a up and coming experience for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I happened to be like reading the player's handbook at that time, right in the middle of my clinical training. I'm a grad student at this time. I've probably been doing therapy individually for like a year and assessments for 2 years at that point. And so my training and my brain is very much in a headspace of like, how do I provide care to other people?
Awesome.
What is the optimum approach? What kind of populations am I interested in? And having that part of my life co-occur with learning about D&D, like very quickly, I just wanted to play. And then I could see immediately how things I was working through or trying to process through were just opportunities I didn't have enough of, that like D&D's like generating way more simulations of opportunities to like engage with people than real life often can.
Oh yeah.
And I just was able to rapidly see like, this has therapeutic benefit to myself almost immediately. And from there, I was like, well, how could we more intentionally utilize that with others?
So I'm going to drop something in the chat room. So, and if I wish I would have known you were a grad student, because I would have. It jogged my memory on something. So my good friend, he wrote Session Zero. He is not a therapist. He is a clinical psychologist on Dungeons and Dragons. So I think this would be a good show for you to check out. So I'm going to drop the Spotify link inside of our channel, and that's Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast. Robert Walker had just finished his master's last year. He's working on his doctorate now, and he definitely goes into the different steps of the process of how to create characters and stuff like that, and the psychology behind it. So for people who like that type of mentality, that's a good option to do as well. He's been on the show before as well, but just kind of jogged my mind. So 2014, got the player's handbook. You thought things were looking pretty cool. The next question is why? What sparked your interest to do D&D? What was the bite that if anybody has to say, like, what caught you when you started?
Just to play D&D,
Just
not
to play
to
D&D.
apply it further.
Not to apply it, just to play it.
Gosh, I don't know if I have a succinct answer. Like, it was growing up playing RPGs and like watching and reading fantastical content for years, and all of that is so finite. I remember finishing The Hobbit and being like really sad. I had to return it to the library, like because that world and that adventure was just over and behind me.
Oh yeah.
And so kind of having this understanding that I could be in a world like that in a more visceral way. And it's still in my mind, but it also feels so much more real.
Oh yeah.
That's just deeply appealing. And also, I think I was just, again, being lucky, surrounded by people that wanted that too, and that's a necessity.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's what's great is you can continue on those stories that are similar to the fantasy genre that you enjoy, like Lord of the Rings, but now you can, like you said, live it, and you can create your own story with your friends, and it can just evolve and continue. And so instead of you still will get that sense of disappointment whenever a campaign ends, just like when you finish reading The Hobbit.
I will actually.
But you can always start a new campaign. So
I will caveat on that one though. A lot of times, ending a campaign is harder than ending a book. In many ways, I have players that I have ran games with for years, and they dread the finale coming up because they're like, we've put months or years of gaming together into one story, and then we're just going to put those characters that we've lived and grown with away and bring all new ones. And it depends, but there are even players out there that have a very hard time just disconnecting from one character to another, which I think is an interesting idea because of the fact that it shows that there is something different about tabletop role-playing games from any other type of media from what I can tell. The only thing that might be just as close would be other types of role-playing games that are more interactive, such as if you've got a large like community event type stuff, LARPs or fairs, things like that, where they come back year after year after year, because you've put all that time and energy into one thing. But yeah, that makes sense. It really does. That you're like, I read The Hobbit, and then when I hit the end, that's where he returns back to Bag End, and you watch the entire circle of the story end, and you're like, what now?
And there is like a 10-year gap between like The Hobbit.
Oh yeah, it's a 10-year gap between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And then there's
I mean like in my life.
Oh, in your life? Okay, got
Before
it.
D&D came up, but yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of books out there. Like even for me, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, so I went to the library for a lot of my stuff, and I would sit for hours and just read. I've read Lord of the Rings, I've read Dragonlance, I've read Forgotten Realms, I've read Dragon Riders of Pern. for our people who have been in the channel for a long time on this channel, they know that mine started with collaborative writing. I didn't know what Dungeons and Dragons was until I was in high school, and then and I was also a very religious kid, so bringing that into the pile just made it even better. And then throwing the kink in the chain of my first actual role playing was not Dungeons and Dragons; it was Vampire the Masquerade, made it even worse. My grandparents were not happy for until they understood that it was just a game, and then they were a little okay with it. But it was still that concern of this is different, and when other people are recognizing that, I can see something about that makes sense. And there's a lot of times where you see people get so involved into a game or so involved into a story that they do start to act differently on the outside. That is a little scary. I'll get not gonna lie. So,
Yeah, it's a little scary, but it's also part of what I'm bringing to the table therapeutically. Like you can get so into your character and practice them, and the behaviors of your character start to bleed over into the behaviors of your real life. And if you're intentional about this and you're going into that thinking like, in real life, I want to be like more tactfully assertive, or in real life, I want to be a little bit more aware of my impulsivity and like hit the brakes on that when I can. And we start like trying to play our characters in that way, you'll see the same phenomenon. It's just less remarkable to some people because it's not causing as many problems.
Got it. That's actually a good idea. Look at that. We're figuring out the puzzle pieces. And then my final question, and this is going to be something that for you is probably going to blend to the secondary portion of mental health with your end, is when did you pick up the mantle of game master? Because a lot of people will have years and years and years before they decide that they're ready for that type of drive.
I don't think most people are ready for anything that they really want.
Oh, you're
like
absolutely
in a
right.
lot of ways, like you just got to do it eventually, and like do it wrong, and
Many
learn from
times.
it and keep going. I was lucky
I'm
enough
feeling
that
that.
when I first got to play, I had a more veteran player. I've been doing D&D my whole life. I'll DM for you, but that was finite, like so many things. We had a good 6-month run, and then after that, I was like, if I want to keep playing, I think I have to run a game for friends who are curious but not as comfortable.
Yep.
I did read that whole player's handbook. I do understand what the rules are. I had to look them up pretty quickly. There's not a better candidate, at least in my circle of friends.
Yeah, but
running private games didn't last very long.
Yes.
Because of it. Like soon after that, I go on internship. I'm working in the VA. I get the idea I want to bring this into my work. And then it's just kind of fatiguing to be running multiple games in your life, and the social ones kind of fell off for a little while after that.
Yeah, we can talk about that because I've done the whole profession. Like, I'm gonna put these in quotes because the only reason I call it professional is because I was paid to do them. It's the only reason I call it professional.
That's legit.
I don't consider myself a professional game master, but I have done professionally run games. Yeah, I had to come to that conclusion as well. Is I was trying to run at the peak 5 to 6 a week, on top of a full-time job and a full-time family, and not to mention, and this is something I had to learn very quickly because this is how I had to close down 3 of my games immediately. If you play in multiple worlds, things get really weird very quickly because you can't keep track of everything. So I was playing in our stream game in a world, in our homebrew, and then I was playing on startplaying.games through Waterdeep, and then another one was in Tomb of Annihilation, and I'm just like, it just became exhausting. So now if I do a game and I'm running multiple tables, everybody at least stays in the same setting because I can't my brain doesn't work that way anymore apparently. So that was my thought process.
I'm fascinated with this. Did you run like 5 or 6 3 to 6 hour sessions?
3-hour games.
Yeah, that's
3 to 4 hour games. Yeah. At one point, like I said, I was making okay money. I wouldn't say good money in any way, shape, or form. But I was making okay money, especially as a military member. But I was playing, like I said, I was playing Tuesday nights from 9 o'clock till midnight, Wednesday nights from 9 o'clock till midnight, Friday nights from 9 o'clock till midnight, one on Saturday in the mid afternoon. So, and then on top of it, I was noticing how much it was taking away from my own just lifestyle. You know, the kids start saying, "Hey, let's go to the park," or "Let's go to this, do this." Oh no, Dad's got game. That immediately started to rub me the wrong way personally, and I was like, "Nope, I can't do this anymore."
Yeah,
But
it was imbalanced.
yeah, there was no balance.
Mhm.
I went straight in, dive in, and then slowly I've pulled myself back little bits here and there, until we're at where I'm at now. So
Hey, Jared, when you when you made that connection between TTRPGs or Dungeons and Dragons and the therapy and implemented that with the VA, like what was that, I don't know, that light switch that came on to use it in the VA? You're like, yes, we should use it with, veterans who are going through PTSD, and this is how it helps.
I mean, I think the light switch happened earlier on in my story when I was just playing personally, and I was like, oh, I can see how this like translates into my own life and how I am thinking through and processing through some of my own stuff. And even there's a lot of like unconscious beliefs about myself or biases I have that just sort of pop up in my characters, like all of them, you can see a pattern. Um, and so like I knew there was something there. And I'm not the first person to invent blending role-playing games with therapy. That's been going on for decades. But um, I entered it at a really nice time when like the social media was bigger. You could find me more easily than say the therapist that did it 20 years ago. Um, so I knew there was something there. At the time, I was on my first internship rotation for a residential program to treat severe PTSD. And I was working with a clinical psychologist that trusted me a lot, and I trusted them. We had a cohort of 8 veterans for a couple of months who were going to be in this program. And I had the opportunity to propose, like, I would like to start my own group, but it's kind of a weird angle. I got some raised eyebrows and like crossed arms because it sounds superficially kind of weird and unhelpful. And I had to do a lot of work advocating for like the theoretical basis of a blend like this to the hospital staff. So first on my team and then broadly to admin. A lot of that and to the vets themselves. We're talking like Central Texas, Bible Belt. The satanic panic is not gone. It's just sort of muted a little bit
faded
from
away
the
a little
pulse.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of myth busting. What is a role-playing game at all? What's Dungeons and Dragons? Let's look at all of these myths that the media has portrayed for years about it being like for dangerous individuals or for like unsocial individuals or just for dudes. Like none of these things are true, and this is why. Um, that plus I guess I had some trust amongst the individuals I worked with in general. So they were like, you're proposing something weird, but we will play along, we'll follow along. I didn't know for sure it was going to work until session one, though. And so in session one, I get one of those big dry erase or wet erase battle maps, and I create a tavern, and we've already done character creation, and given people their miniatures because I did think at that time that was really important to have a sense of like where people are in space, and if you're not
Mm-hmm.
used to this game and theater of mind, that's like a easier access point. Um, and I just asked every veteran to describe their character, place them into the tavern, tell us what they're doing, and then move on, like set the scene. And everybody does that, and the very last veteran places his figure down and leans back, and then goes, "Oh no." And he's like he realizes his character's got his back to the wall and just like surveying the whole room, and 7 other people have done that at different points around the perimeter of the tavern. And he's able to like organically on his own be like, we're doing exactly what we always do. Um, and then everyone else around the room caught on to that too. and it sparked this like nice brief conversation, and then we just kind of moved forward and played, and more conversations sparked as we went forward. But like within 5 minutes, it was very clear that this is a reflection of some of our lived experiences, and what do we need to do with that?
No, so this is a funny story, and it's why I wore this shirt. So there's an organization out of Colorado called Genghis Khan. It's a small convention, ran in February. Uh, 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to meet somebody who, if you've been in the TTRPG community for a long period of time, you know the name by the name of Luke Gygax. It's kind of a thing, right? So the company I was writing for at the time said, "Hey, we're doing a little event the day before the convention. Come out, hang out. We've got some special guests stopping by. Have a chat." That same situation happened. Sitting in this event, I've got my back against the table or the counter, sitting in a corner. Next to me is a dude who's about 3 inches taller than I am, and I'm 6 foot. And I realize who I'm standing next to. The first thing out of that man's mouth is, "Are you military too?" I went, "Why?" He goes, "You haven't moved from your spot. You carry your drink with the cup covered." He's like, "And every time you come back to it, you look at every single door and window in this room." I said, "Yes." And that spawned a 4-hour conversation standing next to Luke Gygax, with a conversation, 90% of it was about the military. It had nothing to do with tabletop at the time. But you're right. In both gaming and in real life, we notice these things, and it catches those moments. To say that, because I've also seen that in my own characters, both in a fantastical format as well as others. Sometimes it's dangerous, in my opinion, for people like that to take a role-playing game that's a little less fantastical and try to do that, because you dive into some very deep and hidden things about yourself that most of us are told when we're in. Just kind of hide that for right now. We don't need to deal with that right now. We'll figure it out later. And then, it comes into a problem now, like for most of us. So, yeah, I'm off my soapbox now. So if anybody else wants to continue.
The main comment I wanted to jump on
Go
was
for it.
just about that character creation process, and how like we come through our characters
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. I think some of the most therapeutic, like bang for my buck I've gotten has just been in character creation with the people I work with. It's a projective test. It's kind of like an ink blot you're making yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you are trying to be just fantasy you, or regular you, or your ideal self, or what you think is the opposite of you,
Mm-hmm.
it's still what you think is the opposite of you. Or
Right.
I'm going to be like a jerk. It's still what you think is a jerk. Um,
Yeah.
and you can't help but project onto it. And I think that's actually really valuable. It can be dangerous when you're blind to it and it's a mysterious
Mm-hmm.
process. But if it's demystified, we know what's happening and it's unavoidable, like we can be a lot more intentional about it.
Yeah. And I like that idea that you immediately. And I think that's something you'll see with very new players, because if you're a new player, they're going to, because they've never played, they don't really understand all the mechanics of everything, they're going to pick somebody that feels very similar to who they are. And we've seen it across the board in any TTRPG I know of. The first character you usually play in that TTRPG is somebody that makes perfect sense to you, because otherwise you're trying to figure out all these other little nuances of the game. Why add the other puzzle piece of, let me add a personality that I can't fully wrap my head around right away to that puzzle piece. So, yeah,
Exactly.
that's interesting. The where they position themselves and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the character creation is a huge one. I know myself and some of my friends, looking at you, Josh, if you're listening, will have like tens of characters. Josh will have hundreds, where I have tens, just ready, like mapped out, and they're all just looking back, you're looking, at them, it is just like little yous, or what you like, little pieces of you that you were projecting and think, would be fun to play or play out, right? A lot of my characters, uh, now, like starting out, like you were saying, James, like play the typical character that's, not not nuanced or anything like magic, so
Mhm.
jump straight to the barbarian. But now that I've gotten my feet wet with it, I'm more comfortable. I do tend to play more charisma-based characters. Like Bard is one of my favorites, um, because I do like being the face. I like doing a lot of the role play and the interactions with the NPCs and a lot of the talking, because the role play aspect is my favorite. The combat's my least favorite part in
Mhm.
D&D, which is, some people would probably slap me for, but I just like the role playing piece. And so that's where I've started to pick up playing more bard-like characters or charisma-based characters, because I like the interaction.
Mhm.
I've always been into like building relationships and interacting with people. And so, Jared, how can Operation Tabletop use some like subclinical therapeutic methods within our games, without getting too therapeutic with it, right? Because none of us are therapists. We just want to bring people to the table, play D&D, and the act of playing games, not necessarily just D&D, but any tabletop game, is therapeutic in itself. And the point is to have peer supporters at the table and be able to recognize indicators and then get them to people such as yourself for higher level help.
So that's a complicated answer, and I'm going to start with like some broad concepts and then try to elaborate. And I'm trusting y'all to point out like a gap in what I'm saying so that I can go back and elaborate if I miss it.
Sure.
But I think I want to start with transparency and intentionality. Like you're not doing capital T therapy, and if anybody thinks you are, you're already in trouble. So to make that really clear, I think is important. Unfortunately, the line between therapeutic and psychotherapy can be kind of fuzzy. You know when you're on the extremes. So on the safe side, we're going to be thinking about things like communication skills and advocacy skills and like a lot of interpersonal life skills kinds of things. Um, on the other extreme, we don't want to be helping our friend like process through their trauma at the table, especially if the rest of the table isn't even aware that that's happening. Um, yeah.
Been there, done that, had to deal with it.
But like that middle space is a little bit more complicated. Like where is exactly the line? And I might ramble a little bit because even in my position, I couldn't tell you definitively where it is. Like if I do psychotherapy, I kind of have everything covered. And if I'm not doing psychotherapy, there's going to be less processing at the end of a game. We're not going to turn it into a group therapy session. Um, we're certainly not going to be touching on like traumas or anything with like that might trigger a player around the table. There's definitely going to be like safety tools involved, so we kind of understand the parameters of what is okay and not okay for everyone here. But then we get into like more common human experiences that also come with diagnoses like anxiety and depression. If you're alive, you experience anxiety and depression, whether or not it's got a diagnostic label attached to it. Probably. I probably shouldn't get like say that definitively, but it's a bet I'd make. And if I'm working with somebody who is depressed at a subclinical level using an intervention like this, it might look more like fostering community, showing up on time, engaging in behavioral activation, which is to say, engaging in valued activities to you that are intrinsically rewarding by itself. And a lot of the individuals I've worked with in therapeutic settings have said, this game is not intrinsically rewarding to me at first, And then I spend like 2 sessions with everyone else. I feel like I'm part of a team for the first time or the first time in years. It's much more about the connections in the game itself, and then suddenly it is a deeply valued activity. Um, Sorry, I am processing your question and kind of thinking, and I'm creating some like dead space there.
No,
But
you got
No,
it.
you're good.
uh,
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah,
Your
I
thought
was
process.
holding the same way. I was like, okay, this is good. Like I like it personally because as a game master and playing a game master for so many years now, sometimes it's without knowing until it's way too late in the step process that you're like, oh wait, they're trying to get me to figure out their trauma. Like I'm like, no, that's not. I can't do that. I don't have that ability to do that. And sometimes it's way too late in the game where you already tried to analyze it when you didn't understand that that's what you were doing. And I've had to tell players, I was like, hey, I get it. There's something rough has happened in life, and normally we'll talk off stream on that one or off the game for that stuff. But I'm like, I can't help you with that. That's not I don't have that skill. You need to move on to something that here's some resource to take care of that because
yeah, and like move on's a heavy thing. I don't know if it
Mhm.
has to be you can't play with us anymore, but
Right,
you we want you to be really mindful about what it means to and looks like to play with us.
right.
And it might be really beneficial for you to seek out this third party that can be specifically helpful.
Yeah, move on
Um,
might have been a bad word. Like, not gonna lie, that would have been the bad word. I shouldn't have said it that way. But
I'm real pedantic. I'm sorry.
no,
No, no,
that's no,
I'm
because
used
that's
to pedantic
something
people.
that yes, it's a thing to point out, but it is as well because words mean something. And a lot of times we say things, and sometimes maybe that meaning is different to other people. So if I said, "Hey, maybe it's time for you to move on to something a little," you could. Somebody might take that the wrong way. Where if you're like, "Hey, let's try to find some extra help to guide you through this while you're playing," it would definitely be a big deal. So explore your.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You're talking
Operation.
about, oh, sorry, Seth.
No, go ahead, Jared.
Oh, you're just talking about a fundamental, like, human condition issue with, like, communication is so darn hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have to engage in a lot of meta communication when I am playing socially or therapeutically with other people. That's like setting rules and expectations around communication. When I say this, it's going to mean that.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Agreed.
And then, and like gauging comprehension. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
what did you just hear? Oh, I just heard you want me to move on and not play with you anymore. Oh, no, that's not actually what I meant. Let me
Right.
like that again. And going back and forth like that. And D&D has actually been a phenomenal way to set that expectation for gauging comprehension because as a player, I don't always know what my dungeon master is talking about. And so I
Mm-hmm.
have to like parrot back what I think I heard and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
As the game master, I can't always tell what my players mean, so I will repeat back what they are describing to me, and then they have this chance to correct or confirm my
Right.
comprehension. And like we're already modeling that as a normative behavior in play, and then it shows up elsewhere too.
Huh.
Nice. Yeah. The Yeah, it's great to gauge the comprehension because yeah, some people will just make up or just hear obviously the communication there's miscommunication and they'll fill in the gaps or if there is that kind of missing pieces and someone who's dealing with depression or anxiety, I'm sure having been someone who's dealt with that will fill in those gaps in very negative light, and then you may have just put somebody off to coming back to your table. So it's good to make sure that what they're understanding that your intentions are good, you're there to help them, and to be a teammate and a good dungeon master. And we make sure that whenever someone onboards as a volunteer, that it's very clear to them, make it very clear that they are not therapists. They're not there to be um, therapists, and they're there to be peer supporters and to lead games at the same time. So if someone does, again, if someone does have an issue, address it offline and see if they, if you have to ask them that difficult question of, hey, are you thinking about committing suicide? Whether the answer is yes or no, you you can still figure out what resources can help them, right? And knowing what resources are out there is really important. And that's one of the points of the PTSD Awareness Month, is because people don't know what they don't know. It's like Operation Tabletop is very new, and people don't know that we're a resource out here that's filling that niche of nerds who are looking for this community. And it's hard to find other people to engage with in this community and play with, and to have a place that will help build that and facilitate those connections barrier free, such as like purchasing players handbooks. Hey, you don't have a handbook? Shoots, man, here you go. Oh, you need a year subscription to Roll20? Sure, man. Like, that's an example, right? It's like, hey, are you gonna be a volunteer dungeon master? Yeah, man, we got your subscription, dude. Here it is, because you're gonna be leading games for us. And yeah, so it's good to build that ecosystem for veteran support and to let them know that it's out there. Like, hey, when someone comes to Operation Tabletop and sits down at the table, they might learn that there's another organization out there that will help them in another way, and that they didn't even know about. And now they're getting this holistic help, if you would.
Yeah, it's like therapeutic networking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think
Exactly.
that way, because I didn't even think about it as being therapeutic networking, but it really is. I mean, we're bouncing back and forth, and you're getting ideas, and you're helping people, and you're connecting, and that's awesome. Shoot, let's see what we got. Does anybody in the chat room have any questions? I know one that's really interesting, and I don't know if it's I guess it's almost like a trauma response, but how do you deal with players who are getting hit by this thing called character bleed or bleed over effects, where something has happened in a game and they're remembering it and they're almost experiencing it like a trigger trauma as well, that they can't seem to pull through? Have you had any experiences with that?
Can you elaborate on can't seem to pull through? I just want to make sure I'm like wrapping my head around the scenario.
Let's say a very traumatic thing happened to a character, and this is not just affecting the player during the game, but they're having things like dreams or things that are happening in their real life that trigger their response of how their character was responding in the game, where it's almost this flip effect of, it's no longer me playing my character, it's my character's almost playing me at this point. And I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts on that.
I got some thoughts, but not some direct experience.
Okay.
Like, that hasn't actually popped up for me. But the first thing I'm thinking is, like, that character must have meant a lot to you. What does that mean? Like, who is this character to you? I kind of just want to understand that. In the same way that if I was working with someone who just lost a family member, I'd kind of want to understand who that family member was. Why did they matter to you the way that they mattered to you? How do you process grief even in that scenario? I think a lot of that's going to be like some more classic grief work. I'm thinking about journaling, doing a lot of writing, if not like just talking through it. You got to articulate it somehow. It can't just hang out in your brain and
Right.
exist as like emotions and flashes of imagery. There's something really magical about journaling where you are forced to articulate what's going on inside and put words to it, and you can think and talk way faster than you can write, and it also slows you down. You really sit with those feelings. But I'd probably want to start there and like literally do grief work around a fictional character. Why does this matter to you? Where is this popping up? Honestly, right now I'm in this exploratory space where I don't fully understand the scenario. I just know where I'd start.
Right.
And I feel like that's a lacking response, to be totally honest.
I mean, I'm kind of in the boat too, because it was somebody had brought it up to me that they were having that experience, and I was like, I have no idea. Like, Game Master, I can do cool things in a game. Outside of a game, I have no experience in this whatsoever, because for me, I play 9 characters in an hour half the time, like between the NPCs, the monsters, everything. So connecting to those characters is very uncommon for me. Where I think other people's, it's sometimes their connection to their character is like a family member, or it's like a, I mean, at this point, it's part of themselves for a lot of things. But yeah, I might have to have a reach out to that person and get a direct connect with you two and have you have that conversation because I
Yeah, because you
don't.
Yeah.
what is their
That,
fantasy life might have been richer or more interesting
Mm-hmm.
than their real life, so like that loss might be catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know if you've ever been in love and then had a breakup and then had the thought like, well, that's it. I'll never find somebody that makes me as happy as that person. I'm going to be sad forever. And that's inevitably like not true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's a common thought process
Yeah.
for a lot of
It's
people
like the
going through
first.
that.
It's like that first love experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So my character, I can't recreate this. I can't just make another one. How dare you even
How dare
assert
you?
that? Yeah.
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 Um,
But yeah, as a therapist, I'm wondering like a lot of beliefs around that character. Um, when we experience traumatic events, our beliefs about ourselves, other people in the world tend to
mhm.
get altered in some way. A like really common bread and butter treatment for PTSD is cognitive processing therapy, and we're looking about how those beliefs have changed over time and how they might have gotten imbalanced. And we're not trying to obliterate an unhelpful belief as much as like learn more about it and rebalance it. There's a reason it exists and there's a reason it's unfair, and like how do we meet in the middle?
Mhm.
And like I immediately assume I can apply that in that situation.
Neat.
Um,
I got curious because like you started talking about character bleeding, you started talking about like trauma effects and stuff like that, and I was like, I need to really bring this up because now my curiosity getting spiked. So,
Yeah.
but
In Operation Tabletop, we want that to happen, right? We're not
you
like
know,
intentionally building games to traumatize anyone, or
mm,
to obviously because we don't want to intentionally traumatize. We're just playing D&D how it's meant to be played, and we're not tailoring it to one demographic or the other. It's exactly it is what it is when you play, um, and when those moments do happen, right? Like you feel an emotion pop up that's pretty it triggers a traumatic event for you. That's when you recognize it, and then you say, "Great, I'm sorry that this is happening to you, but it's great that it's that we can recognize it here because now we've recognized something that you're going through, and we can get you higher help." And segueing into um, another question for you, Dr. Kilmer, is if active duty or veterans want to utilize SafePoint behavioral health and use your therapeutic methods, how how can because I don't what's the process for them to get connected with you?
oh, okay, so that's a hard question, but I got some answers for you. First thing is like safe points in Washington, and there is like licensed jurisdiction on like where people can work and who they can treat. So if you are not in Washington State, um, safe point's probably not going to be very helpful in particular. Um, that said, I'm still here. Like if a individual question pops up, I could potentially point people in the right direction. I'm usually a big fan of advocating for a nonprofit called Take This, and they do have a like a therapist directory across the country for like geek and gaming therapists who are going to be more in the know. That doesn't necessarily mean they're using tabletop role-playing games, but it's kind of nice to have someone who can speak the same language if you've got some overlap. Um, Also, I ran some of these groups in the VA, like, in the VAs I worked with, and that would be like Dallas and Waco, Texas. That's still very localized in an area.
mm,
But I'm not the only therapist in the VA running groups like this. Dr. Allison Battles is a great resource if you are um, in a VA that offers this kind of group. I would ask around and see about joining it. If you're not in a VA that offers this kind of group, but you have a provider that you know is interested, I'd like bother them to bother Dr. Battles. And by the way, great name in so many ways. Um,
Doctor Battles. Like,
yeah.
Perfect
can you
name.
make it any better, easier to connect those two?
Um, and I'm afraid there's like a component of your question, Seth, that I have neglected. And so like I need to re-ask you. What am I not speaking to?
Uh, the component would be, and it doesn't have to be specific to Save Point behavioral health, but um, I mean, obviously with Alice in Battles being VA system, that's clear cut. But with the Take This nonprofit, linking up with you know geek, geeks and nerds who are also therapists, that's great because when I injure, like I like to work out, and when I injure myself, the doc or the therapist that I go to, I want them to have a background in weightlifting or understand it because they understand what it is that I'm doing or how I got injured and can direct me and speak the same language. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, you get the doc who's just like, oh, you can't squat anymore. It's like, no, that's not the right answer.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's it's kind of the same idea. If you work with a therapist who speaks the same nerd language as you, they can use those tools to help you, like you're doing. So if the point of the question was, if how can active duty and veterans, I guess, get this therapy? Um, will like through Take This? Do they take TRICARE? Is it free? Like, what are the barriers to them getting this care? And how can Operation Tabletop or other nonprofits eliminate those barriers for our vets?
That's a truly hard question with a disappointing answer.
Yeah.
Like,
Sorry
so
to put
for
you on the spot.
example, Take This doesn't offer direct services. They will have a directory to people who might. And do those individuals offer like therapeutically applied role-playing games? Maybe. Probably not, but maybe. Um, the reality is an intervention like this, I would argue, is still in its infancy. We've got a few decades of research, although most of it halted between like the 90s and 5 to 10 years ago. And in the last 5 to 10 years, it started to like come up again because it's been demystified. It's not satanic. We can like study this and be taken seriously. But that does mean the data we have is compelling, but not robust.
Yeah, it's
That
still
does
young.
mean that, yeah, like the training that people have for this is limited. Some providers are really excited and they want to make this their specialty, but you kind of need this perfect scenario of a provider that cares about this deeply and wants to blend their therapeutic practice with an interest or hobby of theirs. And you need clients that feel the same way. It's very difficult to achieve. Um, I can't confidently recommend a service that will take insurance and provide this. So in lieu of that, I would say make it your own. And I'm not saying do therapy, but if I'm a veteran and I'm surrounded by other members of my community that want something like this, maybe we're not engaging in capital T psychotherapy, but we are doing something therapeutic. And I don't mean to be reductive when I compare that to other things that are therapeutic, like a scented candle, but they have value. Um, and I still think a group like this has value. And if I want to work on me, maybe what I need to do is join a group, be really mindful, understand what my triggers are, work to not cross a boundary, but make my character with intention, make behaviors for my character with intention. At the end of the week, go to my individual therapist who I've already vetted and think is cool and speaks my language and talk to them about like what happened in that group. What did it mean to me? Why am I anxious about going back next week? Like let's make it make sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's perfect. Every everyone who's listening out there, like, let's take that, or James, can you take that clip, save it, everything he just said,
I wish I
and we'll
could.
blast that out. And like, if
Yeah,
you're
we'll
thinking about getting into this space, remember those words that Dr. Kilmer said, because it's true. Like, Operation Tabletop is here to facilitate the games, but and it is therapeutic, But the thing is that you have to come in with the intention of, you know, and being mindful and with the intention that you're here to just enjoy yourself and, not cross any boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And because sometimes people will come in and they'll just be total chaos, like murder hobos, and it's not fun for anyone else. And then you ruin the therapy for everyone else. So you have to come in with, hey, like, and if you are doing that, recognize it and seek help. Go to a real therapist and work on those things while you're also continuing to play the games, and then work on, and then that therapist can give you some things to work on while you're playing.
Yeah.
With your friends.
Well, I don't want to miss this because we've had 2 questions that have popped up in our stream, and I want to make sure that we're answering these specifically because this is what we're looking for as our audience to see what we can do to help. So Arclight Court is a fellow streamer, fellow game master, and fellow veteran. State asked the question: do you think that Session 0 tools, lines and veils, trigger warnings, X cards should be revisited after an arc in a game, and reestablishing communication lines and expectations before continuing?
Oh, yeah, without question, I believe that should happen.
Yeah.
I think Session 0 is a necessity. And the last comments y'all were making about people coming in and acting like murder hobos, for example, probably could have been resolved with a proper Session 0 where the group talks about their expectations. This is what we want our game to look like. This is not what we want our game to look like. We all agreed. Okay, cool. But that agreement absolutely has a shelf life. It should be revisited periodically. I would say whatever that interval is kind of arbitrary. Maybe it's every 8 sessions. Maybe it's at the end of an arc. Maybe it's we're starting to notice our preferences or our behavior is shifting and we need to just revisit this. This is still what we want. Are we all still aligned on this? So I would say do a Session 0 at the beginning, do it periodically, whatever that means to you, and maybe like that's part of Session 0. What is periodically? And do it as needed. Some flag popped up and we just need to address it and double check.
I like that.
And you're gonna do it wrong. Because humans are involved, right? Like, you thought you had a very thorough Session 0. No, you didn't. We left out a whole thing that actually matters to us, and we need to have session like 2.5 now. Okay, that's fine.
No, that's awesome. Just let me real quick make sure, Arclight, if you can in the chat, just let me know if that answered the question you're looking for, or if we need to reevaluate that a different way.
Oh yeah, please.
And then let me make sure. And if anybody's watching Twitch, if ads pop up, make sure you put ad or something in the channel. That way we stop talking. We don't lose anybody, because I don't want to lose anything we're talking about. So it looks like it's being. I don't know if it's running right now or not.
There's an ad running.
Okay, well, we'll give it a moment to take a breath. Take a drink.
All right, ad's over.
Yep, awesome. All right, so our second question comes from Ashkrit. I'm going to get this wrong almost immediately because I have no idea how to pronounce all this. Absolutely, I was asking for further reinforced communication and check-ins. I think both Dr. Kilmer, myself, and I'm sure Seth is probably on the same board with that one, as I would say periodically is definitely a necessity. My personal opinion, and this is just me from years of playing, I do a short one every session at the end, just making sure we're still on the same page going forward. And then after we've completed a adventure or an arc, or sessions have just kind of started to either go stale, strange, off the wall, I do that quick, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what we talked about at the beginning of the game, is everybody still interested, how is everybody feeling about what's moving forward, things like that. And you can even offer it in ways to, and if you want to make it more of a hidden thing for certain people because they don't want to give this out in public format, let them write a feedback for you, like, hey, this is how did you feel about the adventure? How did you feel about the way your character's developing? Those questions like that can be added to all communication.
absolutely.
So,
Like,
Yeah.
we can talk about it as a group, but send me a private direct message or like pull me aside if we're in person. Um, and oh, I had another thought I wanted to elaborate on.
go for
I,
it.
I let myself get distracted and like I
Yep.
think I might have lost it for a second there. Um, nah, too many people are looking at me. I promise to bring it back, write it down.
Too many people are staring at me. There's a
Yeah.
so
And no, Operation Tabletop does that too. So after our game night, so we do game nights every month. It's part of our program, and post game, we'll shoot them a feedback form. Says, hey, how did the session go? Is there anything we could do better? Because obviously, being a business, we want to always improve and help people out. So and make the sessions as best as they can be. And I am very used to being in the military, and everyone else is, who've ever been, is very used to getting spears thrown at them and just, getting very criticized very heavily. So, if for anyone listening, don't hesitate to give us that hard feedback. That really just down and dirty. Hey, the baby's ugly, man. Like, fix it. Copy
Yeah.
that. We'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll fix it.
Seth gave me exactly the like breathing space I needed to remember what I was going to say and segued into what I wanted to say anyway. So as evidenced by my like losing the thread, I'm kind of an anxious person. I want to do a good job for my friends around the table or for my clients like in a therapy space. So I'm very used to asking like, hey, do you have any feedback? What went well? What are you taking away from this? What didn't go well? And on a personal note, I'm much more excited to hear and reinforce what you don't like. Because I know I gonna do a pretty good job. It's cool. It's rewarding to hear what you did like, but I crave what you didn't.
Yeah.
I want to react excitedly about that. I want to take that seriously. And that's kind of the vibe I want to give all of my players too, is like, this is not my game to you, it's our game.
Mhm.
What can I do to make this more your experience?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it should be that. I mean, I think it's an hour game, right? Like, and that's something that we've talked about. And I think that's something we talked about on Wednesday as well. In your aspect, it might be a little different because you're adding the therapeutic session or therapeutic thought process behind it. But for me as a game master, like, yes, it's an hour game. So if everybody's not having fun, I'm not having fun. But if everybody's doing stuff to make it so nobody's like, we've got to have this balance because I have to also have fun, right? But I also want to caveat that to say that's not me attacking my players. Like, fun for me is not that. It's telling a great story, and I think that is for a lot of people. Before we continue, let me make sure because my screen is bouncing very quickly as our new people are coming in left and right, which is awesome. I'm hoping everybody's getting some really good information on this.
Yeah, Astra asked, have you dealt with much apprehension to people trying TTRPGs?
Oh, absolutely. Whether that came from other providers in the hospital asking me things like, but why are you playing computer games? Or, but why aren't you just playing Monopoly or cards? Like, they just fundamentally don't understand
Right.
what games could be, what tabletop role-playing games are, and what makes them unique. So most of the resistance, though, comes from the individuals who would participate in the group. Either they don't care about fantasy, they don't care about games, or like they just don't understand how it would be helpful. And in my head, I put like a little parenthesis of like yet behind each of those points. Like they're something you can really talk through. But the reality is, I don't think most people are going to benefit from this. I think some people are. I think you kind of you got to want to be there. You have to find it in some way intrinsically rewarding and interesting by itself.
Right.
So let's be really conservative and say that's 10%. Okay. Like we can still capture those 10%.
Yeah, we're still benefiting those 10%, and
Right.
even if it's 1% of the amount of people that are having PTSD trauma is a lot of people.
Thank you for saying that. Like, if
Yeah,
you think 1% is a small number, go to a sporting event and
yeah,
look around and just start making up random labels for what that 1% is. There's a
yeah.
lot, whatever you think you're looking for. Um, and when I was in the hospital, I remember like a lot of treatment works as expected.
Mm,
But there are individuals where they've been through treatment for a while and they're kind of jaded to it, or like they're not quite ready for more, I don't know, treatment that might be more like leaving them raw, for
mm,
example. Like I need to process my trauma, but I'm not ready to,
right.
as an example. Or I'm just I don't like the traditional group format of showing up. You can't tell if I'm there or not there. You're just lecturing at me about an idea and then I
Mm,
leave. Or a different form of group therapy that is more broadly supportive and it unfortunately turns into like let's just trade stories about who had a more traumatic experience, which isn't very helpful.
oh yeah,
Um, but
the one up scenario.
yeah, but because of all of that, there's a lot of people not engaging in treatment that they could engage in or leaving treatment early. And in both cases, like I think that's very reasonable.
Mm.
And
It's
this
like
is a modality that allows that population to access something that they didn't have access to.
right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something you and I talked about, Seth, on Wednesday, is the idea of like this skill set of like a niche therapy now. So like you've got people who are therapists who are hikers. You take a whole bunch of people up hiking into the mountains for a while, and you have this conversation there with people that are all already have that connection. Or in our case, tabletop, where we're putting a story behind it, and we're almost putting this, a funny way to say it, we're putting this overlay over ourselves, right? So that we kind of can take ourselves behind. It's like, no, we're not talking about me. We're talking about my character, but that can very quickly develop into talking about yourself and your own situation. Um, I just think it's unique that we're now finally looking at mental trauma in a way that makes sense for each person rather than just this whole idea of mental trauma, where everybody is known. You get on, you talk to a therapist, and they sit there and they ask you why questions until your eyes bleed. No, there's more to it, because like you just said just a moment ago, you have to be ready for that kind of trauma, that kind of therapy, or that kind of experience in general. Um, and this kind
Yeah.
of blends that.
Do you need it? Do you want it? And are you ready for it? Are three very different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I'm afraid I'm like not fully answering Astra's question. So, like, your hiking metaphor resonated with me. If you said, "Hey, do you want to go hiking with us?" I'd say no. I don't have the gear. I don't hike that often. Like, this is actually kind of a big ask for a
Mm-hmm.
mysterious process. I wish
Right.
hiking was not as mysterious. I'm a little embarrassed for saying that out loud. But the point is, I had to be ready to address that too with players who were apprehensive to play TTRPGs. I would have even been that person
Mm-hmm.
like 15, 20 years ago. For me, I had to be like, I did read the player's handbook, start to finish.
Right.
I don't want you to show up with materials. I don't want you to show up knowing how the game works. I want you to show up wanting to engage in a collaborative storytelling process and ready to like pilot a character that you know enough about
Mm-hmm.
to move forward. If you can like visualize and articulate the actions you hope they take, I understand how to convert that into like game mechanics and tell you what to roll and when. And
Right.
after a few sessions, you'll internalize that too.
Mm-hmm.
And that has reduced a lot of people's apprehension.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any tips you would have on somebody who's might not even be therapy based? Maybe you're a game master and your family is apprehensive. Any ideas that you might be able to? Because this might also help with this question of have you dealt with much apprehension for people trying? Any tips, tricks, or thought processes? Maybe ways to reword things to state like, hey, why not? Like, how can you at least get them to try it?
Like convincing a player to try playing, or
Or
convincing a
convincing a
potential game
person.
master.
Yeah. No, 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 not game master. No, no. We'll hold off on that one because normally the game master is the person who either is super excited, the most excited, or the only one who's ever actually played. One of the two. Or you get those randoms that they just picked up the book and they said, "I'm going to game master."
Yeah.
That's very rare.
I mean, I think the reality is I wouldn't try too hard.
Okay.
I don't want to twist somebody's arm into being in a scenario that they don't really want,
Mm-hmm.
but I would want to understand, like, if I'm allowed to know, I'd like to understand what motivates the no.
Got it.
Is it I have no interest in fantasy?
Mm.
Is it I actually struggle to sit still? I have ADHD. I get bored. I don't want to be at a table for 3 hours. I like y'all very much, but that's not how I want to spend time with you.
Right.
We could actually work to accommodate that. Take more breaks, trying to change up the play style, make sure people are engaged in different ways. But maybe that's not it at all. Maybe they are afraid of the mechanics. And so the thing I said of, don't worry, I will kind of Sherpa you through this is what changes it for them. But there's nothing worse than getting someone to acquiesce when they didn't want to be there. That's going to come through.
Got it. Yep.
And I'd say the same thing for therapy. If
Yeah.
you need it, I hope you come. But like, I would never make you show up because I think that actually does more harm than good.
Got it.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it.
Yep.
Any other questions we have from the chat? Make sure you're tossing those up. Do we have any questions from social media or Discord that you're seeing, Seth?
Let me check. I don't think I have any questions
I
from
didn't
Discord.
see any. You all know I would not do this on a normal interview, but this is a special one that we also are trying to get as much information out to our audience. I don't see anything at the moment.
Yeah, it is good not to try and force people or overly sell it, you know.
Mm.
It's there if you need it, you know. Just like therapy, it's there if you need it. And I think what's great about organizations like Operation Tabletop, or you know, that are down and in, and they're that stepping stone to seeking therapy, right? So you get out your boots on the ground, you get that isolated person, you start to insulate them, you know, maybe after a few sessions they're going to be spending more time with you and with the community rather than going to the bar or engaging in activities that aren't productive. And then the next stepping stone is that higher level therapy, right? Because a lot of veterans are cynical towards therapy since day one, having bad interactions with military mental health facilities, and they get jaded and they're just like, you know what, I don't need that. Or that's always the stigma that, oh, I don't need that, I'm a tough guy. But getting people to the table, letting them feel a little bit vulnerable by playing a silly character, getting them to open up, helps destigmatize that, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I completely agree with you, Seth. And to validate that perspective of like the individual that has had negative or maybe less impactful experiences with mental health providers, especially while active duty, like that absolutely happens. I think I'm going to put my foot in my mouth if I'm like, there are no good therapeutic experiences. There absolutely are. But like the ratio is real wonky. And the motivation for like supporting active duty versus veteran is different. Sometimes we just want to make sure you are like good enough to go back out there, and that's not actually holistic. And I'm not going to talk about the pragmatism of that or whether that's right or wrong, but the function's different. And I would absolutely assume negative therapeutic experiences in the past. That breaks my heart, but like, yeah, that's very normal. If we can acknowledge that that's true, I think we're more likely to be in a scenario where we try again instead of gaslighting people and be like, nah, it's actually fine. Just go do it. They've done it. Their personal experience says otherwise.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm flying too close to the sun.
No,
you're good, man.
I think
You're
I
not close
think you're doing
enough.
great.
I'm just kidding.
Is that a joke? Because I was out in the sun all day, and I feel like I'm extremely red in comparison to everybody else on the screen.
Oh no, man! You should have seen my forehead
Yeah.
before I started, dude. Shout out to my wife Jenna because she threw a little bit of makeup up there because I got burnt
Oh,
to a crisp yesterday at the beach.
ouch.
I was like, oh no, I gotta be on the street today.
Yeah, but
I'm jealous. My skin tone is vampiric, and the sun is like just right now.
Yeah.
So,
so. All right. Well, like I said, it's been such a great conversation, and would hate to shut it down preemptively. But we have passed our hour-long interview. I did want to make sure that we answer all of our questions from our chat that's in there right now. So if you still have a question, or give it a couple more minutes as everybody kind of wraps up, and I'm going to let Seth take it over for a little bit and give an idea of what's happening over this next month. And while he's doing that, toss those questions in. We'll answer those questions, and then we'll close out for the night. So, Seth, this is your show now for the next however long you need it. But tell us what PTSD Awareness Month is, what the Gameathon is, how they can get involved, and then we'll see what other questions that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the PTSD Awareness Month Gameathon, there's two pieces to it. The Operation Tabletop piece is to bring vets together, execute our mission by bringing them to the table, and play and giving them a space to play play tabletop games. And then from there, we're also going to be spreading PTSD resource awareness, right? Say, hey, there's these great resources out there you might not have thought about, and at the same time trying to destigmatize seeking that help, right? And then the second piece is the charity arm, which Tabletop Misfits is a collaborator on, and it's being led by a great Twitch streamer that we partnered with, which is Northwolf 911, and there's a bunch of collaborators on there, and they're out engaging with their communities to solicit donations, which is great because that takes that work out of our hands, and we don't have to solicit those donations because it's not for us. It's an awareness event rather than a fundraising event, because we don't want to get people to the table and then be like, oh, while you're here, donate to us. I mean, it'd be great if you did, but that's not what this is about, because it's solely about executing our mission, and spreading that PTSD awareness, those resource awareness pieces. So tonight, in about 30 minutes, we're going to be doing a D&D game. Dr. Kilmer, you are more than welcome to join us. I think we have like one seat left. And then, let's see, next Saturday is Call of Cthulhu. Then June 15th is Mini Painting and Catan. And then June 22nd is Candela Obscura. And then June 29th, again with Tabletop Misfits for another roundtable discussion to close out the Gameathon. And then the last game is Baldur's Gate 3.
Nice.
Yep. And so that's Gameathon here.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any new questions. I would ask personally if you're able to, Dr. Kilmer, because it will be a roundtable, I'm just going to have veterans in the actual channel, in our actual Zoom channel. But if you would like to be a part of the chat and come in as almost like this extra behind the scenes to answer any of those questions as we continue to dive through things, it would be an honor to have you back for that for the 29th.
I think I can make that work.
Be
yeah.
awesome.
Send me the details. I'd love to. Yeah.
So it'll be the same time, around the same time, but it's just going to be a bunch of veterans talking about their experiences of how they've used tabletop to fight trauma, or well, not fight, but to deal with trauma, or to how they were able to connect with others during this way, just as a wrap up to this amazing event that Operation Tabletop is putting on. For those that are listening, though, tonight you will find out there are some special guests that we have asked to join. So if you do show up on the 29th, you could see some faces that you might have seen within the TTRPG community. And there's some people even in the chat today that will be there with us. So looking forward to it. As we wrap up tonight, thank you once again for the two of you to continue to promote the PTSD awareness. and therapy in a gaming way, which is, I think, freaking epic. But um, Seth, it was an honor to be the host for your first interview for this thing, for this month, and to be again
Super
here at
grateful.
the end. Dr. Kilmer, thank you for taking your time and to hang out with us on a Saturday night, which I'm sure you could have other things to do besides this. But yeah. Any of you have any final words to say? Your guest information just popped up in the stream, so this is a great time for us to close out. So if you have any other questions, any other answers, anything else you guys want to say before we close out?
Yeah. Lastly, I was coached after our last session, James, to always end with a soliciting of a donation. So if you would like to donate, this is the worst. This is the part that I'm the worst at. We talked about this is the donations part, because I just like doing the mission. But if you would like to donate to Operation Tabletop, you can go to operationtabletop.org, and there's a big button that says donate here, and you click on that, and you can set up a recurring donation or do a one-time. Any amount helps. Seriously, even $20 helped us put on a mini painting event that was just epic. It was great to get down and sit down and just paint minis with some vets, and it acted like that sort of group therapy, just like a board game would. So, yep.
Awesome.
That's my last piece.
No, you're good. Anything for you,
I just
Doctor?
want to say thanks to you, James and Seth, for having me on here. It was an honor to be invited and a lot of fun to be around. Looking forward to the 29th. If questions popped up for listeners that they either couldn't or were like, they couldn't ask for some reason, I'm online. If you just Google my name, you'll absolutely find me in a couple different places. And don't hesitate to reach out and ask me to elaborate on something. And if you're looking for me in person, I'll be walking around PAX West in a month or two.
Oh darn! I'm
When it
not
comes
going to
back.
West. I'll be at East this year, or not East. I will be at Unplugged this year and Gen Con, and I think that's it for my season.
That's good enough. That's a good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but once again, I'm Tabletop Misfits. I am the honored host for these events for this Gameathon, which is an opportunity that I'd not expected, but very thankful for having. You can, if you like what this is all about, come check out all of our interviews on Wednesday nights as we talk with all sorts of guests from anywhere from organizations that are doing things to people who are writing books to TTRPG streamers and more. You can check out all those at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over here on Twitch. So till then, I hope you guys come back on the 29th as we have a big group coming in to talk as a roundtable to finish this up out. Otherwise, head over to Operation Tabletop and get yourself in a game because it's going to be a lot of fun. I get to go play in like 10 minutes. Super excited. Everybody, bye!